I grew up knowing Lucas, mostly from a distance. We were from the same neighborhood, and our paths often crossed on the street, but our worlds were vastly different. I came from a simple family. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Lucas, on the other hand, was part of the well-known Grayson family, who owned the largest company in town. Everyone knew them, and almost everyone envied them. One day, as I was walking home from my job at the local grocery store, Lucas approached me. It was unexpected. We barely spoke before this. "Hey, Tiffany," he greeted, flashing a smile that made many girls in our town go weak in the knees. "Hi, Lucas," I replied, a bit surprised. "How are you?" "Good, thanks. Look, I was wondering if you'd like to grab a coffee tomorrow." The invite took me off guard. "Coffee? With you?" "Yeah, I mean, we've known each other for years, but never really talked. I'd like to change that. What do you say?" I hesitated, then said, "All right, why not?" From that day, things moved quickly. Our coffee date turned into dinners, movie nights, and long walks. We spent days getting to know each other. The more time I spent with him, the more I realized we had a lot in common. One evening, as we were walking by the river, Lucas turned to me and said, "Tiffany, these past few weeks with you have been amazing. I've never felt this way about anyone before." I looked up at him. "Lucas, this is all so new to me. I never expected any of this." He took my hands in his. "Neither did I, but now that we're here, I don't want to let you go." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Before I knew it, Lucas was on one knee holding out a simple ring. "Tiffany, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes. "Yes, Lucas. Yes, I will." The news of our engagement spread quickly. Everyone was surprised. No one saw it coming. But here we were, two people from different worlds, finding love in the most unexpected place. As the wedding preparations began, I couldn't help but feel like I was living in a dream. The Grayson family was beyond supportive. They welcomed me with open arms, especially Lucas's mother, Mrs. Harriet Grayson. She was thrilled about our union and took charge of most of the wedding arrangements. "Tiffany," she said to me one day, "I want you to have the best wedding. You're going to be a Grayson now." "Thank you, Mrs. Grayson. I never imagined any of this," I replied, overwhelmed. "You deserve it, dear. Lucas is lucky to have you." The big day arrived sooner than we expected. As I stood at the altar, looking at Lucas, I felt grateful for this unexpected turn my life had taken. Little did I know, things were about to change in ways I could never have anticipated. The move to our new home was swift, just days after our wedding. It was a quaint, charming place, not too large, with a hint of vintage charm. Lucas had picked it out, saying it was perfect for us to start our life together. From the moment we stepped in, I felt an unexpected chill, not from the house itself, but from Lucas. The warmth he had exuded throughout our courtship seemed to evaporate. Our rooms echoed with silence, broken only by the mundane conversations about household chores or grocery lists. One evening, after setting up the dinner table, I tried initiating a light conversation. "The house feels cozy, doesn't it? We can maybe get some plants for the balcony?" Lucas, who was absorbed in some paperwork, merely grunted in reply. Sensing his detachment, I attempted to bridge the distance. "Lucas, is everything okay?" He looked up, seemingly irritated. "Yes, why wouldn't it be?" "I just feel you've been distant since we moved in." I hesitated. "Did I do something wrong?" He sighed heavily, avoiding eye contact. "It's nothing. I'm just busy with work." "But you're always here, at home, with me," I pointed out, trying to understand his sudden change. Lucas's voice hardened. "Look, Tiffany, I have a lot on my mind. The marriage, the house, my work responsibilities. It's all a bit overwhelming." I felt a pang in my heart. "I thought we were in this together," I murmured. He didn't respond, just got up and headed to our bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the now cold dinner. The days that followed were no different. Mornings were a hurried affair, with Lucas often leaving before I was even fully awake. Evenings were cold and silent. I tried engaging him, suggesting we go out or inviting friends over, but he always had an excuse. Mrs. Harriet Grayson, during one of her visits, sensed the tension. "Tiffany," she whispered, pulling me aside. "Is everything okay between you two?" I bit my lip, trying to hold back tears. "I don't know, Mrs. Grayson. He's changed." She gave my hand a comforting squeeze. "Give it time, dear. Marriage is a big step. Perhaps he's just adjusting." I nodded, but deep down, doubts were setting in. Was this how my married life was going to be? In the shadow of Lucas's coldness? Determined to find answers, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Days turned into weeks, and the cold atmosphere in our home continued. The initial days of trying to break the ice with Lucas had led to a routine of silence. I'd find myself often staring at the wall, counting the minutes until he'd return home. But when he did, it was as if I was living with a stranger. One evening, I decided to cook his favorite meal, hoping it might cheer him up or at least get him to talk. As I set the table, I thought of our earlier days and how he'd compliment my cooking. Now, the very idea of him sitting to eat with me seemed like a distant dream. Lucas walked in later than usual. I greeted him with a hesitant smile. "Hey, I made your favorite tonight." He glanced at the table and then at me. "I ate out." "Oh," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." There was a moment of silence. "Lucas," I started, my voice firm, "we need to talk." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not now, Tiffany." "When then? You've been distant for weeks. I don't even know what's going on in your life anymore." Lucas looked at me, his face expressionless. "It's just work. There's a lot of pressure." I nodded slowly. "But we used to talk, Lucas. We used to share. Now I feel like I'm living with a ghost." Lucas looked away, not meeting my eyes. "I need some space, Tiffany." The words felt like a blow. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Space? We live together, Lucas. We're married. If there's a problem, we should be facing it together." He didn't reply, just turned and headed towards our bedroom, leaving me standing there, lost and confused. The next morning, I woke up to find him already gone. The bed was neatly made, and a note lay on the pillow next to mine. "Had to leave early. Don't wait up." Days passed, and the pattern continued. Lucas would leave early and return late, often after I'd gone to bed. We became like two ships passing in the night, with barely any interaction. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room flipping through an old photo album, tears streamed down my face. Pictures of our early days, our smiles, our closeness, seemed like memories from another lifetime. Mrs. Grayson dropped by unannounced. Noticing my tears, she sat next to me, concern evident on her face. "Tiffany, what's going on?" Wiping my tears, I replied, "It's Lucas, Mrs. Grayson. He's changed. I feel so alone." She looked at the pictures and then at me. "Marriage has its ups and downs, dear, but communication is key." I nodded. "I've tried talking to him, but he shuts me out." Mrs. Grayson patted my hand gently. "Then maybe it's time to take a different approach. Find out what's really bothering him." Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "You're right. I need to get to the bottom of this." Determined to uncover the mystery behind Lucas's behavior, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the vast mansion, I'd often find myself waiting for Lucas to walk through the door. But more often than not, the ticking of the clock was the only sound that kept me company. One evening, after yet another night alone, desperation took over. I decided to call Mrs. Grayson. Perhaps she knew something I didn't. Maybe she could talk some sense into Lucas. "Mrs. Grayson?" I started hesitantly, when she picked up the phone. "It's Tiffany. I was hoping to speak with you about Lucas." There was a brief pause. Then, in a softer tone, she replied, "Oh, Tiffany, what's the matter?" Taking a deep breath, I confessed, "Lucas hasn't been coming home. He's hardly ever here, and I don't know what to do." To my surprise, her tone shifted instantly. "Tiffany, my son has responsibilities, bigger than you might understand. He's managing a massive company, trying to maintain our family's legacy." Stammering, I tried to explain. "I understand, but he doesn't come home. At all. Nights are so lonely." Mrs. Grayson's voice hardened. "You knew what you were getting into when you married him. You need to adjust and be grateful for the life he's providing you." Tears filled my eyes. "I just want our marriage to be how I imagined." There was a cold silence. Then she said, "Lucas mentioned you might be difficult, always wanting more. You should be thankful for what you have, Tiffany." The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me even more bewildered and alone. Whatever Lucas had told his mother had painted me in a terrible light. What was he hiding? Why was he driving this wedge between his family and me? It was clear that I needed answers, and I was determined to find them. I enlisted the help of an old classmate, David, now a private detective. Within days, he presented me with photos that made my heart sink. Days turned into nights, and my sense of isolation grew. Each evening felt like an echo of the previous one. I'd walk through the grand halls, touching the expensive decor, but feeling more disconnected than ever. One gloomy afternoon, while I sat in the drawing room staring blankly at the pouring rain outside, my phone vibrated. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" I said hesitantly. "Tiffany, dear, it's Aunt Margaret, Lucas's aunt." Surprised, I replied, "Oh, hello, Aunt Margaret. It's nice to hear from you." Her voice was warm, but there was a hint of concern. "I just wanted to check in and see how you were feeling, dear. It's been so long since our last chat." I was puzzled. "I'm fine, thank you. Why do you ask?" She hesitated, then said, "Well, Lucas mentioned you'd been struggling lately. He said you'd been having a tough time adjusting and dealing with some personal health issues." I blinked in confusion. "Health issues?" Aunt Margaret continued. "Yes, he mentioned you were battling severe depression and that he's been so worried about you." The weight of realization hit me. This was the story Lucas was spinning to his family. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. I don't know where he got that from, Aunt Margaret. I've been lonely, yes, but I'm not suffering from depression." Aunt Margaret sounded genuinely surprised. "Oh, well, he seemed so concerned. He even said he was getting you the best treatment and medications." My mind raced. Not only had Lucas been lying about his whereabouts, but he'd also been crafting an elaborate tale about my supposed condition to his family. Trying to keep my composure, I said, "Thank you for your concern, Aunt Margaret. I'll have to talk to Lucas about this." Before we ended the call, she added, "Well, since you're feeling better, I'd love for you to come to my birthday celebration next week. I'm inviting close family, and it would be lovely to see you." "Of course," I replied, trying to mask the turmoil inside me. "I'd love to." Once the call ended, my emotions were a whirlwind. Lucas's deceit ran deeper than I'd imagined. But Aunt Margaret's invitation gave me an idea. It would be the perfect place to confront him, surrounded by the very family he'd lied to. As I pondered my next moves, I felt a newfound determination. Lucas had woven a web of lies, but I was ready to expose the truth. The festive atmosphere of Aunt Margaret's birthday celebration was in full swing when I decided it was time. As guests laughed and chatted, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the confrontation. Lucas stood amidst a group, laughing at some joke, appearing to be the perfect son and husband. I approached him, my hands clutching the jars of medication, each one empty. The murmurs of the gathering dimmed as all eyes turned to us. With every step, my resolve hardened. "Lucas," I said, my voice loud enough to command the attention of the room. I placed the medicine jars in front of him, their labels glaringly evident. He glanced at them, his laughter fading, confusion clouding his eyes. "What's this?" he asked, his tone flippant. "These are the medications I'm supposedly on," I responded. "The ones you've been telling everyone you've been buying for me." He stared at them, genuinely puzzled. "Why are you showing me these?" He picked up one jar, examining it before carelessly tossing it onto the floor. "This," I said, pointing at the shattered jar, "is how much you know about my so-called illness. You can't even recognize the medication you claim to buy for me." Whispers swept through the room as realization dawned on the guests. The air grew thick with tension. Lucas's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his eyes betrayed his panic. Aunt Margaret stepped forward, her face a mask of shock and anger. "Lucas, is this true? Have you been lying to us about Tiffany's health?" He couldn't respond, cornered by the weight of his deceit. The room was a sea of accusing eyes, each one demanding answers. "I trusted you, Lucas," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Not only did you betray me, but you also lied to your family, to everyone who cared about us." He looked down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The room remained silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. All the pretense, the stories, the lies, they had finally caught up with him. With the shattered medicine jar as the only sound, the room was thick with tension. Lucas had gone pale, his confident facade crumbled. I wasn't done, though. With one last ace up my sleeve, I took out the pictures David had given me. Pictures that showed Lucas with a woman who wasn't me. "Recognize her?" I asked, handing the pictures to Aunt Margaret, who was closest to me. She looked at them, her eyes widening with recognition and dismay. "Oh no, Lucas, not her," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "What is it, Aunt Maggie?" one of the cousins, Sarah, asked. Aunt Margaret looked up, her expression grave. "This is Isabella Travers. She's well known in our community, for all the wrong reasons." I felt a chill. The way Aunt Margaret said it, it seemed this Isabella had a history with the family. Lucas's mother, Mrs. Grayson, approached and took a look at the photos. The color drained from her face. "I thought you were done with her after—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I can't believe you'd do this to Tiffany, to all of us." Lucas was cornered, looking between the two women with panic evident in his eyes. "Mom, it's not what you think," he started, but Aunt Margaret interrupted him. "We all warned you about her years ago, Lucas. We thought marrying Tiffany would have set you on the right path. Isabella is nothing but trouble." Lucas seemed to shrink, his posture slouched and defeated. "It's not like that. I mean, it started out, but it's complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, my voice sharp. "You marry me, lie about my health, and all the while you're with her? Explain that complication to me." Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it, no words coming out. He looked broken, defeated, but I felt no sympathy. He had deceived everyone, and it was time for the truth. Aunt Margaret, visibly upset, handed the photos back to me. "Tiffany, I'm so sorry," she said. "You deserve so much better than this." I nodded, looking at the pictures. "Thank you, Aunt Maggie. All I wanted was the truth." The room was filled with murmured conversations as the party guests processed the revelations. Lucas looked around. No friends in sight, no allies to defend him. He had played his games, and now he was facing the consequences. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The truth was out, and I was ready to move forward, away from the lies and deceit that had become my life. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The beauty outside stood in stark contrast to the turmoil that had just occurred inside the Grayson household. I sat on the porch steps, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. David approached me, his usual confident demeanor replaced with genuine concern.
"Are you okay?"
he asked. I looked up, forcing a smile.
"I will be. Thanks for everything, David. Without you, I'd still be in the dark."
He sat down next to me. "I just wish I could have done more. No one should go through what you did." I sighed. It's done now. All that's left is to move forward. He looked out towards the horizon. "What will you do now?" "I haven't decided," I replied. "But I know I can't stay here. I need a fresh start somewhere away from all this." David nodded. "You deserve happiness, Tiffany. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I smiled, feeling a warmth despite the situation. "Thank you, David." Inside, the murmur of voices continued. Some of the family were angry, some confused, but the truth was out, and everyone knew it. I had no intentions of going back inside. Not now, not ever. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a message from Mrs. Grayson. "I'm so sorry for what happened. We will refuse Lucas financial support. He can forget about inheriting the family company. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Take care of yourself." I replied with a simple "thank you" and put the phone back in my pocket. After a while, David stood up. "I should get going. If you ever need anything, Tiffany, just call, okay?" I nodded. "I will. Thanks again, David." He smiled, patting my shoulder reassuringly, and walked away. The house behind me felt cold, unwelcoming. The only thing tying me to it was the memories, and now they were all tainted. The next morning, I packed up my belongings, leaving behind everything that reminded me of Lucas and the life I thought I had. Aunt Margaret offered to help, but I declined. This was something I had to do alone. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The house, Lucas, the lies, they were all behind me. Ahead lay a new journey, new beginnings, and a chance at happiness. The end was also a new beginning. I knew challenges awaited, but I also knew I was strong enough to face them. With each mile I put between myself and the past, the brighter my future looked. The road ahead was open, and I was ready to embark on my next adventure, free from the shadows of deceit. And as I drove into the rising sun, I felt a sense of hope and renewal, knowing that the best was yet to come.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.